Again, for anyone who doesn't have it, that's the Nearpod. If you'd like access to that, please.
And other sorts of protection.
I'm going to ask that whoever has a TV in the background, if they can just mute themselves, please.
Oh, I'm very sorry.
It's all good. Listen, things happen.
That's not going to really.
It's a radio. I'm old school.
Nice.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I got to stop. Everyone should mute themselves, right?
Yes,
So,
everyone.
yeah,
just
so
mute
that's,
and
I'm sorry. I
on
can't
mute.
find a screen here.
All right.
Here we go. Sorry.
Excellent. No worries. So everybody should have access to our Nearpod. Is that correct?
Yep.
Or you're viewing it here. And actually, we want you to have access because it's going to be interactive. So let's get the show started. We're recording. So my name is Moses Ojeda, principal of Thomas Edison High School, and I'm joined today by Danielle Ragavanis and Philip Baker. They are actually social studies teachers. They lead the Model UN class, not a club, at Thomas Edison. It's an ICT program. And the year that I became principal, they pitched this idea to me. It didn't get programmed. We fought to make it happen, and it did. And I'm so happy because they are leading change at Edison. And during this pandemic, the reason I think we've been able to, and the name of the workshop is resilience, because of the fact that what they did and had started helped us to get through this pandemic. So we're going to share our journey, where we are, where we're going. So again, thank you everyone, if I haven't said it already, for signing up and joining us today. Great to see so many people we know from the past and the new people joining us. Thank you for the support. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Ragavanis, who will get us started.
All right, so just a little bit about our journey and what our vision is.
Throughout my 12 years in school, I failed to see the bridge between what I learned in school and how I can apply it in real life. I'm not really taught that. Everybody's just focusing on like the test at the end of the year, which has made it like much more difficult. And I wasn't really engaged in those classes.
Students lack engagement because school is so repetitive from elementary school to middle school to high school. We're all taught the same thing. It's usually the same thing about history. We're always learning about the past. We don't learn about the present.
Where's the mech tech class?
In all, it was a great leadership experience for me because it forced me not only to recognize my skills and awaken latent potential in me, but to also see the potential in others.
There's one thing I would like you to clarify to my students on which kind of connection did you do and how did you do it? Because I think that's where we kind of face some trouble.
Okay. So each one of these, we have a wire running through. I'll hold it a little closer so you guys can see. So we have a wire running through connecting them on this end. And then for the ends that we connect to the actual battery and solar cell, they're connected through this bus wire.
That's important to know. And that led to conflict. So you can talk about dating quality. You can find other things. And not to being categories. Because like,
my field of study and my field of work, they coincide. I'm doing elevator escalator work, and I'm doing electronics in college.
After speaking with one of the teachers from the EADB, we had a conversation and she spoke to me about having an all-girls classroom. So she really wanted to enforce the female empowerment or girl empowerment, reasons why she wanted to involve her students into robotics.
As chair of Body Win, what are we, 6? 6.0, my fault for that. I'm like extremely proud of all of this. Part of the reason why I'm like real emotional right now, because I know how much work that we all put into this. And I want you, if you did win award, I want you to take this as a lesson. You're capable of doing more than you think. That's what I went into committee thinking that. Yeah! Come on, boy! And I couldn't do what I just did today, so. Cody! Come on, bro! Don't you ever think that you can't do nothing, man? This is proof right here. This is proof right here, man.
Yes.
And good morning, everyone. My name's Philip Baker. I'm a social studies teacher at Edison, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you today. I found that a really emotional start because our team puts so much into that stuff, and it's so amazing because I wasn't expecting this, that we have a member of our old alumni sitting here watching this meeting. Jalen, it is wonderful to see you, sir. And I know we went through a lot of that stuff together, which makes it really powerful and emotive. And it's great to be surrounded by CTE teachers today as well, because I think that you all will understand a lot of the problems that we're going to start with today. Because the first problem is that old question that we've all heard in class so many times before. Happens to every teacher. You're in the middle of what you think is a fascinating discussion, maybe of Italian unification in a social studies class back in the 1860s. And you've included a bunch of slides and all the important notes on Cavour and Garibaldi, and you've got all the stuff highlighting their nationalist tendencies, and you've been amusing, and you've got stuff on their mustaches. It is riveting and it's fascinating, and you get to that point where you ask the big pivotal question. And you wait for the students to have all those words of wonder and learning that are going to fill the room. And no hands go up. And it's that awkward minute of silence. And you call on the first kid, and he looks totally perplexed. And he says that question that you dread. Why are we doing this? And everyone starts nodding in the room. And you notice it's the first time most of them have moved in about 15 minutes. Even the kid who's mastered how to sleep with his eyes open is nodding his head. And even worse, I don't really know the answer either. Why are we doing this? Oh, maybe I do know the answer. It's on the test. And that is an answer that just bothers us so much. But wait, it's history class. Maybe the reason we're doing this is because we learn from our mistakes. And then the next school year, I teach the same lesson and get the same reaction. And there goes that argument as to why we're doing this. The second thing that I think that you all understand really, really well is the authenticity aspect. This was beginning to really, really wear on us. I don't want to spend my life doing something that in the long run didn't make a single little difference to anyone beyond a test score. Our class had to mean more than just a test or an answer on Jeopardy, which by the time our students were on Jeopardy, they wouldn't remember it anyway. Because we've had so many students tell us that in most classes they teach, they memorize stuff for a test, and then within a week, they've forgotten everything that they memorized. And notice, I don't say learned, memorized, because that is definitely not learning. We had to make all of this in our social studies class, in our academics, more real.
Right, and this is a CTE school, so the students don't come to Edison for the academics. You know, it's going to be the same no matter where they go. What they're coming to Edison for is the shops, and the idea that they're going to be doing live work for half of their school day. They're kinesthetic learners. They think through problem solving. They learn by doing, and it was really driven home to me because my first year at Edison, I actually shared a classroom with Mr. Ojeda. So I taught my classes right after his CTE class. He was in the computer repair program. So I used to come in and I never saw him teach, yet I always saw the kids working. And I always used to tease him that I want to be like him when I grow up and not actually do any work. But what I didn't realize was just how much planning goes into that. But the students were always engaged. They were so excited to be in his class. So I started spending more time in the different shops so I could watch my students have a little bit of life to them. And I realized that what I really wanted was to create a Knights of the Round Table. I wanted to create a social studies class where the students were the thought partners, just like they were in CTE, where in Mr. Ojeda's class, they would consult him and he never gave them answers. They would come to him and say, this is what we're going to do. This is the problem that we found. And he would tell them where to go next. That's what I wanted, that thought partners where we're all in this together and we're all going to solve real world problems, not just the technical problems, but now all the culturally relevant stuff, which is really the last point. And that's the fact that we're a brown school. And our students are really proud of it being a brown school. We're about 50% Asian, 25% Hispanic. It's only 4% white, yet the school is designed with the European mentality of, you know, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, everybody sit in rows and you work independently. Most of our students come from collectivist cultures where it's driven by community solutions and community involvement. You do things for a bigger purpose. And we had lost that completely. So we decided to create something, not even that we were going to create, we were going to make the students to create something that was more authentic for them.
And this kind of brings in what our first ambition was going to be. So this goes back a few years now. And our first ambition was to make history class into something far more useful and bring it to a class that had the Regents exam at the end and really eliminate that question. Why are we doing this? The other ambition, and you may be getting this idea already, is that my partner Danielle there is a real visionary person. And this is where the other part of the ambition came in that I found a lot more challenging and even a little bit uncomfortable. Because the ambition was, and I know Jalen's going to laugh about this, is for me to shut up and for the students to lead the room. And this is, you know, this is Danielle's thing, right? She is a real visionary person. Ever since I've met her, she's always known what education should look like, and she still knows what education should look like. I love this meeting we had not too many months ago where we were talking with an outside group, and it was this big meeting and lots of people were there. And the question comes up, what is it that you are afraid of about the upcoming digital school year? And you can guess the answers, right? How are we going to do the technology? Will the teachers understand the technology? Will the students turn the cameras on? Will the students do the work? How are we going to deal with NXs? Gets to Danielle. She says, my biggest fear for this year is that we're not going to learn anything from it. And at the end, we're going to go straight back to doing what we did before all this started. Go back to being good enough. And for her, good enough was never good enough. She wanted this utopian classroom with students leading students, genuine collaboration, and teachers as facilitators. me as a facilitator. I vacate the front of the room and I stand on the side and I facilitate. Now, I found that very risky, very nerve-wracking. I'd always been a successful teacher. I'd always been a popular teacher, somebody who's great at standing in the front of the room. As Jalen would tell me, I'm great at be-chatting. It just goes on, and it always has been great. And my observations had always been great. Do I really want to blow all that up and try this? I'm so glad I did, because Miss Ragavanis made me do it. But the more I stepped away from the front of the room, the more amazing things that I saw happening as a result of that. Students could control a room. Students could control each other. Students could even control me. Every time I spoke when I wasn't supposed to, I got gavelled, and I was not even allowed to really do what I'd always done. But how great that was, because first of all, in MUN, we go to all these conferences, and our students compete against the best and brightest around the world. And we'd always done well. But when I stopped micromanaging them, they did even better. That shocked me, because I always had felt like if I didn't put it into their heads, they would never actually know it. I found out the opposite. The less I put into their heads, the more they put in there themselves, and the better they got. And once that happened, their ideas got more and more incredible. They started inventing stuff in our classroom, the kind of thing where they'd study the problems of the world, and then they would try and actually solve them. And this first started on a day about 6 years ago, when two students suddenly started to build a solar panel for a school in Pakistan at the back of our classroom. I was terrified. I didn't even understand what they were doing. The most likely scenario seemed to be that they were going to set the school on fire. But what actually happened was that they invented this thing that was eventually sent to Pakistan and allowed for that school to educate more people. That would never have happened with me standing at the front of the room and teaching people stuff. It only happened because the students invented it themselves. And the thing that always amazed me about that whole experience was that that can only happen in an atmosphere of incredible trust and openness. And Mr. Ojeda, the question I always have to ask you is, how did you create that atmosphere?
So thank you for that question. You know, one thing I always tell people is you have to have the buy-in of the administration. And so I had to go through that process. And like Phil Baker, I had a hard time releasing control because I like to micromanage things. I wanted to make sure everything came out right. And, you know, you anticipate that it may not go wrong, right, and may go wrong because you're putting it in the hands of others. And so what I quickly realized by immersing myself in their world of Model UN and constantly stopping by, bringing visitors in, was that it can happen. Don't be afraid to let go. As long as you create the environment and the structure, these students will thrive. So what I'll say is that if we go on, you look at the academic, because I want to get right to it because we're pressed for time. But if we look at the academic engagement here, this is a survey that was given to students, okay? When we look at CTE, if we go to the next slide, look at the engagement for CTE. And I don't have to tell you what CTE does for students because this is a CTE conference, we know that. But what I love about these two teachers, they're academic teachers who embrace CTE, that want to bring CTE into the classroom. And so they decided to create a pilot program. They created a pilot program where they designed an actual micro-credential, sometimes known as a digital badge, where it's called Prep 21, where they took that mindset of Model UN, the structure of the academics, and the presentation, and immerse that with the CTE. Again, that's what the kids wanted. And so we see here the engagement and how high it reached. And here we have Jalen, who's a former student here, who will give us a thumbs up because he experienced it. And if we move on to the next slide, this question that I'd like to ask, because we're pressed for time, if you could just let us know, in this remote learning environment, what are some of the challenges you faced? Because that'll set us up for what's coming.
Thank you, Sean. Good point. Yeah, it's been a big problem.
Right. So student engagement. Thank you. And if we can, yeah, let's look at this. What's coming up here? We have right, the active participation, which I think by all means something we've purchased is Nearpod and Pear Deck to try to increase that participation. Collaboration between students in the class, something that I'm worried about with our 9th graders coming in. Yes, the technology that's not available, internet access at home. You know, I receive a report as a principal that lets me know in my district under my superintendent's portfolio how many devices have been delivered and distributed. And it hurts me, it bothers me when I see 200 iPads sitting at the school because they don't have someone to manage it or they haven't put a system in place. And here we are mid-year, and some of those still have to be distributed. Work completion, as we know, is an issue, keeping the kids motivated. So thank you for that. Something we encounter, but I think what we're going to share out next is how we've increased the engagement, especially in this class that these two teachers lead. So if you look at a school-wide comparison, this was a student perception survey from 2018. Again, we took a snapshot, we mimicked the questions, and we did the school one versus Prep 21. You see these numbers when it comes to the positivity of how it affected students, the engagement alone with Prep 21. So we're going to give you some of those tools today before this presentation is over.
Right. The important thing about this was the fact that we wanted to make sure that this wasn't just something that was about me and Mr. Baker. This was done where it was other teachers in other classes so that we could prove that anybody could do this. It wasn't just simply the cult of us. So we came up with competency-based learning. So the idea was that we were going to take professional level skills, communication, collaboration, problem solving. They were going to be founded in research and they were going to be aligned to the CTE courses. So we worked with Apple to develop the competencies. There were originally, I think, 67 of them based on Wiggins and McTeague. And we narrowed it down to the 8 that are highlighted by the shops that our students go into. But what we found was that when we started competency-based learning in September and we tried to roll this out to the teachers, they were more worried about being able to use Zoom. They were more concerned with looking at breakout rooms and Jamboard. And we realized that the technology gap between what the teachers were able to do and what the demands of remote learning were going to require, we had a big problem.
And a danger to the health and safety of New Yorkers. We had to tighten up the rules further.
Quarantine really, not even just students, quarantine grounded everybody. Good morning. Capitalism, communism, whichever system you follow is wrong. A theocracy best fits an individual, and that is what Ayatollah Khomeini enforced.
The Ayatollah wants you to remain in the past. If you remain in the past, you'll never benefit and be prepared for the future.
All the Ayatollah has ever done was talk nonsense, deindustrialize Iran, and put it back into the 7th century.
The MTA buses are significantly late.
Basically just introducing yourself as something simple, anybody can do it.
Why should we hire you as leader of the world? And why should we not hire the other candidates in this room?
I want to completely modernize the world and also keep bad leaders away, as I have done previously, and generally support everyone's views on religion and overall industrialize the world.
China is prosperous. It is going so good there. The economy is amazing. The trade is amazing. Everybody wants to trade with China. And who did that? Me.
My built-in road thing, I started in 2013, and it improves so many other nations. As I used the example earlier, Kenya, where I built a railroad.
Why are you not telling everybody that what you did wrong did leave a very negative impact on all the people in China?
Because I have the ability to listen to my people and their needs, and the other is show dictatorial power, which, what is a country without its people?
It took a quarantine for us to actually click as a group. Like, everything got shot in our faces, yeah. Whatever we had to do, yeah. But everybody was on the same page. We all were in it, like, together.
And that really was going to have to be the next ambition. How to take this out of a social studies class and spread it across the building. Everything that you just saw that we did during digital learning there, that's all content embedded throughout the activities that the students did. And that was the key. Make sure that the students got the content through what we were doing. But more importantly, make sure they got what we call out of the basement readiness. Make sure that they were ready to move on into their careers with the skills they actually need. Danielle and I did a lot of looking at places like Glassdoor to see what skills it is that students, employers want students to have when they move into the workforce. And we made sure that we tried to build those skills into all the activities that we did. And then we started taking that beyond social studies into other classes as well, including phys ed and so many other places. Here's the ones we looked at. Communication, how to make sure a student can actively and effectively present what they know. I've seen tons of students through the years who have known a lot, but been unable to communicate that. That's not going to help you in the future. How to collaborate. Too many times teachers will assign roles. You're the leader, you're the writer. That's not real collaboration. Our students generally hate collaborative work because they don't feel like it's collaborative. They feel like it's too forced. One student does everything, everybody else watches. This is real collaboration. How to reflect and how to inquire. You saw our students asking questions, reflecting on their own work, and making sure that an assessment is not final, but it's something that you will get feedback on and then make better and better. And eventually, once you get to the top of the chain, how to create and how to innovate, how to be an entrepreneur, and how to take social responsibility.
So I'll jump in here and say that the one thing that we were conscious about and needed to make sure is that we know technology tends to hinder the communication when it comes to face-to-face, when it comes to a kid expressing themselves. And so now that we're fully remote, that just adds another layer of difficulty, right? Because once we go hopefully back to return back to normal, I hate to say the new normal, the normal, hopefully, we need to have these kids to be able to be vocal, present themselves, and engage and lead a team. That's the one thing I've always said at Edison is I want to make sure that our students leave there as the leaders of tomorrow, because I want them to lead up teams. So how do we make sure that that communication stays with them and that we practice that communication for the future? And I think a lot of you have mentioned that today, having the camera on, being able to speak up. You saw a lot of that. We're going to give you some best practices. So we created a document and we tackled communication first. So what we decided to do is we know for a fact that the reason some kids don't have the cameras, it has to do with the fact that there's an environment at home. Earlier today, I was joking with Mr. Reynoso because I was like, I know you have your little ones at home. And he was like, yeah, they're acting up. And so you would hear that. The other day when I communicated with one of my students, she had her 2-year-old and 4-year-old brother that were climbing on top of her. So, you know, it becomes a little awkward sometimes for these kids. So we have to create the moment and the space for them to be able to express themselves with the camera on and to actually speak vocally and explain things. So we came up with the competencies for communication. And the other thing as an administrator, what I wanted to make sure is I need to create the space for teachers to feel comfortable to try new things, right? They're already overwhelmed with the technology and having to learn things quickly. So we wanted to be upfront and say, listen, when we come in for support visits only, this is the checklist that we'll be looking at. And these are the guided questions for the visit. If you're able to answer this, and more importantly, your students are able to answer this, and they know why they're learning, not just for the sake because there's an exam or because they need to know this for the future, we're going to be in a good place and we can continue to move forward. And so when we look down further, and the reason this was also created, the guiding questions and the support for the teachers, is because I have 10 APs and I have to make sure that the vision that I have for the school is reflected across all the 10 APs that I have. And so they needed a document to guide them to make sure that that message gets across, because sometimes with the message I've learned has to be given to 10 different individuals, each one can slightly change it up depending on how they perceive what was said to them. So it's really key to make sure that when you're working with a big school like ours, that you put things in place, I've learned, to make sure everybody stays accountable and on the same page. So now I will turn this over to Ms. Ragavanis to explain what you're looking at here.
Yep. So what we did was we created active links. These are all things that connect to all of the PDs that we did for the entire fall semester, now in one location, plus examples of both rubrics and activities that are divided by ability. So level 1 typically being 9th grade, but also depending on the student's abilities, students with disabilities, Ls and others that may need more introductory activities, going up through level 4, where the students are now actively applying their knowledge in real world situations. And it's we worked with Mark Williams from Brooklyn Tech. He happens to be a Toastmaster. And so we developed these activities. So some of the activities may repeat. However, they look at different things and they build upon skills that they should have gotten in previous levels. And then the rubrics we generated with the teachers to say, okay, what is it that looks, do you need to be able to do in 10th grade from both the communication standpoint, but also from the way the content is used. So that 9th grade, the content is very central, but by senior year, they're actively applying their knowledge to real world situations. And that was our biggest thing, was things needed to be transferable. There needs to be that real world application in order for them to do it. And then the other thing we did was we created activities that were subject specific. Math and science are always telling us that's fine, tell us what this looks like in the classroom. So we made examples of that. We filmed our own students in different types of ways so that they would see how both the depth of knowledge and the communication rubric would combine to create a competency-driven, content-based lesson.
And this we're offering to you for free of charge. Feel free to use it. At the end, we'll have our contact information if you need guidance on it. But what's key in order for this to work that we designed at Edison is our professional learning model. So the teachers come in, they learn the communications competency, they work it into their activity or their lesson that they're going to do. And so then they come back and share it. They share how it went, what needs to be structured differently, what didn't work. And so it's a cycle. They go back in from what they learned from their experience when they share, they work it into their lesson again. So it's the learn it, work it, share it aspect that we've created. And I got to tell you, it works really well because at all points, that teacher feels supported. And at the same time, it's ongoing practices. It's not the, one time here it is, do it and good luck, as we're known to have been doing in the past. So they really feel comfortable and they get to share out their work, and they're proud of that when they share as a meeting. So these two teachers here, Mr. Phil Baker and Ms. Ragavanis, they've actually now completed the entire schools by department. They've actually met by department with students to have discussion with the teachers when they learn the competency-based learning communication skills, and they were able to share out with what happens, and they had students as thought partners.
Right. So, and that's really key for two reasons. One, the students give active feedback and they're modeling for the teacher what active feedback revision looks like. So the teachers experience the competency-based learning as well. But it's also so that we have the students go in and work with the teachers live when they're in class. And that allows the teacher to have those supports while they're doing the lesson. So it's not so high stakes because it's not them doing it. Oh, the student is going to lead something. The teacher is there to support, and then they're given the opportunity to kind of low risk take that chance, learn the technology since that was their biggest fear. While the student is working with the technology, the teacher is able to focus on the content and then the competency. So they feel supported live in class. And when they share it, the share aspect is what went well, what didn't go well, and what should we do better next time. So the expectation is that it's not a one-off. Okay, so we wanted to take a poll. Which of the 4 core academic areas do you think is best suited for the communication competency? So if you could just register what you think, you've got 8 seconds.
And I've actually included the link again for those who came in after the session started.
All right, so social studies was by far the most popular. Social studies was the only thing that was popular. That's good. So we actually demonstrated this in math. It actually works really well. So take a look at these. At the end, we're going to ask you your takeaways. So you may want to jot some notes down, but this is 2 examples of the communication competency.
System of equations using 2x2 matrices by Ethan Boopsing. Step 1, solve the given system by Gaussian elimination. As you can see, that's the equation we'll be solving for step 1. Step 2, we want a 1 in row 1, column 1. This will be accomplished by interchanging row 1 and row 2, as you can see in the image below. Step 3, we now have a 1 as the first entry in row 1, column 1. Now let's obtain a 0 in row 2, column 1. This can be accomplished by multiplying row 1 by -2 and then adding the results to row 2, as seen by the image. Step 4, we only have one more step to multiply row 2 by 1/5. Step 5, use back substitution. The second row of the matrices represents y equals 1. Back substitution y equals 1 into the first equation. For the final step, the solution is the point. It's a bit hard to see. It's 3/2, 1.
Okay, and then another course.
So this is how you create an augmented matrix. First, we got to check to see if it's in alphabetical order. If it's in XYZ, both equations are in XYZ. This is also known as a systems of equation. So we're going to draw our little matrix sign here. And since we have 3 variables, that means we're going to have 3 coefficients. And if there's no number in front of the variables, that means the default coefficient is 1. So for the top, it's x plus y plus z. So it'll be 1x plus 1y plus 1z. We just use the 1 since it's the coefficient. So we're going to write 1, 1, 1, x, y, z, 1x, 1y, 1z. Draw a little line here to indicate the constant. For the top, the constant is 2. Now for the bottom, we have 2 in the x, so we're going to write 2 here. And then y and z, there's no coefficient, so it's 1, 1, 1, 1. And then the constant is 4, so we're going to write 4 right here. And that's an augmented matrix.
Right, so same lesson, 2 students. What we'd like from you is if you could please, what did you notice about the 2 videos? What were some takeaways that you got from watching those? Yeah, you didn't need high level tech for that. It was a student just using his phone.
Yeah, I really like the comment about the systematic breakdown of the process. It's one of the most important skills that somebody going into the workforce needs. The ability to describe to a group of people the way that something is done, because it's complicated, it could easily be lost in translation. And so we wanted to make sure we worked in math on the ability not just to do the math, but to explain why they did it the way that they did it.
Yeah, you really you get the idea from listening to both of them, which one had a better understanding of why the answer was what it was.
Yeah, and that's key. So the thing that, first of all, what I love about it is that it was done in math, right? Most of the time, math is what we hear from our teachers. It's cut and dry. It's straightforward. We have to get the kids to solve it. But when you add a layer in the communications where, kid may not have the camera on, but the assignment tells them, well, you have to submit, and you don't have to show yourself, but you have to submit your voice explaining a problem. The teachers were trained also to hear for the tone, the hesitation. That also says a lot in regards to whether or not they're comfortable explaining it, because if they're not comfortable, then they're not understanding exactly how to solve the equation. And so, yes, someone put in the chat before Flipgrid, Luna, which we're encouraging Flipgrid to be used, or they can submit it, if they take a screen, use their phones and submit it via Google form. But the bottom line is that you're getting that communication aspect, but it's not just, having a camera on, because you can have a camera on, the kid never says anything, but actually allowing the camera to be used with purpose for the outcome to be a better future for them to be hired or to explain. And as Mr. Phil Baker said, and the CTE teachers are here, you're always explaining or talking to a customer, depending on the field you're working with, right? You always have to tell them how it's used, what's going on, how you solve the problem. And so those soft skills are key. And the fact that we're still making it happen, making that work with the document we're going to share, you'll be able to do the same.
Right. It's also really flexible in time. A lot of you talked about in your concerns with remote learning, having that ability to connect to Wi-Fi, having the access to the devices. I have twins that are in the same class in a New York City classroom right now, and it's really difficult for the three of us to be online at the same time. They're fighting over who wants to use the laptop, who wants to use the iPad. When they're filming this and explaining their process, they can do it when they're ready, when they have access to the device, when the Wi-Fi is not overwhelmed. But I'm still, as a teacher, getting a really good idea at who knows what they're doing. And some of you commented, the second one was easier to understand. That kid understands what he's doing. So the first student I would pull aside and ask questions to. And now I know who to target and who can move on.
I'll also add, before we go on to this slide, now that you said that, I'm encouraging teachers to actually create assessments where students have to submit a video of them explaining either the process or the work, because that's also going to cut down on work that's being submitted that was copied. You cannot monitor what's being shared and not shared in this environment, right, when you assess. So moving towards project-based learning for assessments, but also submitting video as part of the assessment is another way to ensure that these kids are prepared. I don't have to tell you the ripple effects that are going to be left or that are being created because of the environment we're in. So the time to do something is now, and to be creative is now. Now's the time that we can actually put forth the effort needed. So
absolutely, which brings us to our next step. So one thing that we made sure to build into the school year calendar is an opportunity on a weekly basis to do a lot of PD with individual teacher teams and departments and so forth and so on. We started September with a 4-day overview of competency-based learning with the communication aspect in particular, and all teacher teams built that in and then came back and shared it out on the following Friday, so we could actually see what they did in class, and that's where we got the recorded videos from, and so forth and so on. Now, as the spring semester continues, teachers will continue to add communication into their lessons, but we're also now going to move on to 2 other competencies, one of which will be collaboration and reflection. Collaboration, as I mentioned before, is essential because all modern jobs involve collaboration. But in school, we really struggle to teach what collaboration should look like. And as I mentioned before, the group work that we too often do is not real collaboration, far too micromanaged and far too assigned. So we're really going to build up the opportunity for teachers to enable real collaboration going on in their classes. We also want to make sure that we focus a lot on reflection, really starting in September of next year. It takes an awful lot of time for teachers to give really good feedback on the kind of videos that you just saw. And one thing Ms. Ragavanis and I are working really hard to train our students to do is to give each other feedback. That is a huge part of collaboration, and they need modeling, but once they get good at giving each other feedback, it saves an awful lot of time for the teacher and then they can work on really building those skills up. So this is the whole plan here, is to create a culture that embraces mistakes. It is not one that is afraid of mistakes, feels that mistakes are just something that need to be erased, that cost you points on a test, but the mistakes are steps to make a really good product.
And since we've always got to be moving forward, we've also started with a pilot group. Competency-based learning was piloted before the pandemic started. Now that group is moving into project-based learning. Last week, we spent the entire week training a group of 20 teachers and administrators plus 7 students to build PBL lessons and units. They're going to execute those by this May. We have another group that actually wants to go. They'll be going next week, and we'll have a different group of students working with them. So all of that will be done by May, so that in June we have the PBL 201, where we're going to focus on student engagement and student-centered activities. They'll be creating unit plans that they'll be able to start next year with. And then next year is going to be really about capturing those best practices, sharing them out with the individual teacher teams, and refining our practice.
And what I'm going to add to that is that in the process, always being mindful of the work that teachers have already, the workload, how difficult it is. So we're always trying to build out supports to be able to help with the transition. Again, this is all new, and that creates anxiety and stress. We know that. So just want to throw that out there, that we're always asking our teachers for feedback, how to make things easier. What makes this happen, ladies and gentlemen, are partnerships. And I know Mr. Baker always is mindful of, and thinks about, well, how do we get all these partnerships over time? And he's like, I'm going to ask you that on this presentation. I said, and so I'm jumping the gun here, and being proactive and letting you know that we've cultivated a partnership with Apple for a long time now. They're a thought partner. We run a lot of ideas by them. We're adapting the mindset of Apple in a way because we want to be innovative. We also partner with Teachers College. So our students have worked with Teachers College. These teachers here have actually engaged in a data and analytical course at Teachers College that allows them to collect data to make sure that we're moving the right direction, that it's creating an impact. We also, if you do this right, and this is the last video, but if you do this right, if you take the competency, you take CTE, the academics, and you create this environment for students to lead and to thrive, the next video we show is the possibilities that can come about. And that was a partnership we created with the Africa America Institute. And last but not least, we're part of XQ. So we've applied to become an Imagine School, and happy to say that to this point, we're still being supported and moving on to the next phase. And a lot of the things that we're doing, yes, come through a grant, and that's how we're able to pay for the project-based learning. But partnerships are key. So how do you get partnerships? Well, for those who know me, I'm always out there. I'm networking, I'm making connections. If right now in this virtual environment, it's tough, but I go to conferences. I meet people there in the chat, or I hear what people are doing and I reach out to them. So it's really about being out there and connecting with others and networking. That's how you create the partnerships. That's how people want to give back to your school. And through those partnerships, that's what has made us successful over the last couple of years. So with that, let's transition to our last video, because this, ladies and gentlemen, is where you should try to be at the end.
Beginning in 2015, through the generous support of the East African Development Bank, AAI has co-created this teacher training program to bring outstanding teachers who are in high schools in East Africa in 4 countries, Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, to come and learn the very latest techniques in pedagogy, to also step back from the everyday struggles that they have in their current positions and really just focus on how to sharpen their skills, see how others learn in other parts of the world, and adapt what they have learned to what they can now use in their local high schools.
Shop in the Box is something that was created here at Edison, and it was all student-led, student concept. So our students here come to partake in one of the 12 CTE tracks, which is our career and tech education programs that we have at Edison. And so they felt why not create something to help the world be a better place by putting our careers in a box? So what I love about this project is that it allows them to speak a common language. Both of them are hungry for knowledge, right? Whether it's here in Thomas Edison in the United States or over in Africa. They all want to better themselves through education, and so that becomes the focal point. And so in the process, they're also learning about the community and the different cultures.
It's fascinating to watch young students who are really focused on technical and vocational training, hearing about conditions currently in East Africa, in high schools, and working to develop this idea of a shop in the box. The two things we focus on are educating the world about Africa and also in how education can create pathways for youth to livelihood. Both of those things come together uniquely in this project.
We offer a world-class training, not only in research, but in pedagogy. And in pedagogy in particular, we train students such that they can go back home and apply the principles that they learned and the experience that they learned here into teaching to the students that they have in their own special environment. This might be women who are teaching in STEM-related fields where the population of students is not particularly high. How can those teachers support those students to stay as students enrolled in programs all the way through university level and then go on to productive lives themselves? We have received so far in the past 3 years 16 students through the Africa America Institute program that has been funded by the East African Development Bank. What we would really like is to find other sources of funding to grow this program to other places in Africa.
Who would have thought that we would have been customizing Box for East Africa and making change in the youth in East Africa? I'm so proud to have been part of this collaboration and just hoping that we can continue this partnership and maybe address other needs of the community.
It's really a great thing for us to be able to support this project. We're very grateful for the East African Development Bank's support as our partner in funding these scholarship programs for these outstanding teachers. And we're most grateful for all the supporters of the Thomas Edison Technical High School for all they've done to create this fabulous environment, a very rich environment for learning.
So that was our latest project. And I don't know if you recall, but in the very beginning, the first video, you actually were able to see one of the instructors with their students that was communicating with one of the kids who designed the box. So what happened here, ladies and gentlemen, is this institution brings those teachers over. They teach them the latest and greatest in regards to STEM and the actual hardware they can use, but they can never send that back. And so when they get back to Africa, they lose those skill sets because they don't have the equipment or the supplies that they learned on when they were here in the States. So what our students said was, well, let us customize a box for you, whether it's CTE or STEM related, that you can take back with you and interact with your students. And that's what we did. We created a prototype for Edison. So in case they ran into any issues, and they're continuing to build upon those boxes. And how did that partnership happen? I met someone who found out about the Model UN, who told me, I have a friend who works for this institute. They have to see what you're doing. And when they came out, that's when the conversation happened about creating this project. So it's opportunities like that that we need to capitalize on, because it's mind blowing to think that these kids actually can put that on their resume, that they help this country, those particular areas with a customized box, and they collaborate. And I think about that. We ask kids to put clubs on their resume or to have clubs on their list when they apply to post-secondary schools or jobs. Here, this blows away any club activity. This is what we're after, those rich opportunities. I'll turn it to the teachers if they want to add anything.
I think that's it. If you guys have any questions, we'd be happy to take them.
I'm putting my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. Be more than happy to have our students, our teachers work with your teachers. Again, the document is yours if you need any follow-up, anything to be explained, but we're hoping that the communication competency-based learning can help you maybe in the struggles you're having now with students participating or being able to participate. And so if you have any questions, you can put in the chat, you can unmute. If not, I'm going to put Jalen on the spot to say a few words, being that he was a student. Jalen?
Yeah, I was going to say, well done. It's great to see all of you again, number one. When I was looking at the sessions that I could possibly sign up for, I said I had to make this one a priority. It's good to see all the work continuing. I'm just thinking back, time does fly, but I graduated not that long ago. In 2018, and I remember the things that we were talking about, and the Prep 21 was just getting started, and they would speak to me about making it a digital credential and a lot of things that they had planned, and seeing that it's come to fruition, and then seeing that you guys were presenting today, and seeing that the work is continuing, it really does warm my heart, and it makes me glad to see that you guys haven't given up on it. So it wasn't a phase. It wasn't something, I can honestly speak for that. It wasn't something that, you were just doing for show maybe or anything of that sort, but you guys do believe in it. And Mom, as I would call Miss Ragavanis, she was always like a mom to us, and Mr. Baker too, like a father. You guys, have kept it up, but you're spreading it, and the students that have come after me, I'm sure they appreciate it. And, a lot of different things. I couldn't sum it up in these few minutes, but it's good to see the work continuing, and I'm pursuing a career now as an educator too. So definitely, I hope to use a lot of those things, in my life to come, and all of that good stuff. But it's good to see you guys, and I'm proud of the work you guys are doing for sure.
Oh, we're so proud of you, Jalen. I miss you.
Yeah, and Jalen, I love the way you're commanding the presence already. The way you graduated in 2018, but you do not sound like someone who just graduated a couple of years ago. You sound like a mature.
Jalen was once accused of being a plant. They said he was a student teacher back when we had him because they didn't believe that he could really be as mature and as
was he in the Con Fellows? Was he?
Say it again.
He was the one that, yes, he gave us feedback. Jalen was the only one that criticized me. Yeah, Jalen's the one that taught you how to speak for the Con Fellows.
He frequently criticized me.
For good reason.
And so the other thing I'll say here now that we're talking about that is you need to make students thought partners. I know there's sometimes some fear with that, but when we did the project-based learning, we brought students with us to the training, and that's the first time it was ever done. And the Buck Institute walked away with saying, I don't know why we haven't done this in the past, because of the feedback that the students gave us, including myself. I also took the training because I'm going to do a project with a phys ed teacher, and the feedback just helped us to improve our project because we're seeing it from the lens of a student. We're seeing it from a lens of what they're going through currently in this environment. And so whenever you can bring them to the table, by all means, please do, if you create that opportunity. That's the one thing we're continuing to do at Edison. As Jalen said, he sees that we're sticking to it because too many times, it's the flavor of the month, the flavor of the year. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then you let it go by the wayside. And I'm guilty of that. But this is the one thing that stayed true, that I've invested time and money into because of the impact it's giving. And so if we can change the lives of individuals, and just like Jalen right now is pursuing a career in education, I mean, that's it. We're making it happen. So again, thank you everyone for the support and for being here, having 34 actually, well, 31 actually, because we're three of us, people supporting this workshop. I'm so thankful for that. Thank you. And if there are no other questions, please, again, you can email me if something comes up. But thank you. Stay healthy, stay safe, and most importantly now, stay warm. Be careful out there. Hopefully you stay indoors. Have a great day, and wishing you the best towards the end of the school year.
Jalen, thank you so much for coming. You just made my day.
Mine too.
Oh, anytime.
Tell your mom and said hi. I miss her too.
Hey, say it again.
How's your mom doing? I miss her. She's awesome.
Oh, she's doing well.
Yeah.
She's okay.
Please
Safe
tell her
and well.
hi.
I will. It's so good to see you guys again, man. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was a nice surprise to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Ojeda.
For the person who says we owe continental breakfast, listen, Edison is a good host. You know, when you used to come to Edison, you had good food. We do owe you for those participating. We'll open our doors for you to come check out our place, and we will feed you well.